All right, welcome everyone. I am super excited. Everybody knows me here. I'm Heather Hansen O'Neil. Welcome. Most of you are going to be from the Phoenix, but I did open this up to a few other meeting pros who I know will be very interested in this topic. We have a fantastic interview today, and we've got Justin Cheshire from Cheshire Audio Visual, and he is the director of marketing and business development. Now, I've already kind of prepped you by posting his picture and his bio in the Facebook group page. If you haven't seen that, you can go back to it. But I don't want to go and read an entire bio for him, but I do want, Justin, I want to introduce you, welcome you, say thank you so much for joining us today. But before I dive into questions, can you just give your take on your background of how you got to where you are with this very, very cool AV company of yours?
Sure. Thank you again for having me. Pleasure chatting with everybody today. This is certainly an exciting topic. I know everyone's probably been doing their research the last 6-7 months. But so a little bit about Cheshire Audiovisual. We're a second generation owned company, myself and my brother Jamie. My brother Jamie handles the operations side. I handle the marketing and business development. And then we've got a great team of professionals behind us that are technically skilled, go on the road, do anything from exhibits, live meetings, association, corporate, pharmaceutical, and everything in between. And the company started back in 1994. My father started the company after 20 years working for Eastman Kodak Company here in Rochester, New York, supporting their corporate communications division. And the company was born. And had the pleasure of working with my dad for many years. He's still around, still proud of what we're doing here. And again, happy to be here. So that's a little bit about us.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. So I know that some of we've got a lot of planners. We've got some of them on here, but I've got a lot of planners who keep asking me about virtual events, right? We're going to dive into virtual, we're going to dive
Sure.
into hybrid and all of that. But if someone happens to be doing their first, some of them have been doing it for a while, but some of them are doing their first virtual event. So do you have any advice for someone who's like kind of just getting started with it?
Absolutely. The key piece of advice that I've been giving out and also taking away from the meeting planners that we've had the pleasure of working with is to make sure you treat it like an event, treat it like a live event, put together a production schedule, get your team involved, create a timeline, and execute that timeline, and also rely on your team to do what they do best. Partner up with the right production company, the people you know and trust from the live events industry that you've worked with for, I'm sure, many years prior, and work as a team, have your weekly or daily meetings, and execute those tasks on a regular basis. I've seen the unfortunate side of things when people come to us a little late and struggle to get through those details. You know, you really have to plan it, work with your keynote speakers, work on the topics you're going to talk about, and just really simply plan it like a real live event.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here because as one of those keynote speakers, I have been lately hearing from people who need a speaker for their event in 3 weeks. And I'm incredulous, right? So if for some reason they didn't start as early as perhaps they should have, any last minute things that you want to make sure to think about?
As far as the keynote or the meeting planner?
No, just the event overall. Like, are there things that you find that if people aren't, kind of last minute, do you find, is that just me that people just call me last minute, or are you finding that there's people out there doing this at the last minute?
100% what we're seeing, and that's why we've developed some different processes internally. But really, the simple process is getting the team involved and just jumping on board to help execute.
Mhm.
So consulting, walking through things with clients. We've spent many nights, many days, depending on the projects, working with people to try to educate them on things to think about. But getting all those details together sooner than later is, again, the key piece for that as well. So trying to abstract that really after the fact when it's a last minute request is what we focus our time and effort on.
Yeah, I know you do a quite a bit of hand holding for people, not necessarily, you know, that you want to be doing the last minute things, but you're there for them along the way. Do you have any specific platforms for virtual events that you recommend?
So in the beginning, we really were focusing on trying to create that platform, partner with the right people in the industry to offer that platform. And what we've learned over the last 6 months has really been that the clients are dictating the platform. The clients,
Mm,
through other industry experts, other events they've attended, like Cvent, Connect, and things of that nature, are really driving that conversation and utilizing platforms like Vimeo and YouTube to stream it. But it all depends on what you're trying to achieve, what type of attendee experience you're looking to determine and put out there to your audience, what kind of engagement in general, if there's Q&A, if you're looking to get polling and analytics behind the actual presentation, webinar, whatever it may be virtually. A lot goes into that decision. So I wouldn't start the conversation out with clients with, hey, here's on 24 and this is what we're thinking about would be best. It's really based on a consultation, and really the clients are coming to us with, hey, we want to utilize Zoom, we want to utilize GoToMeeting, we already have a subscription to this platform or that platform, and we've really just adjusted, pivoted, and picked up on that platform and helped support their virtual event.
that's great. That's great. So, are there any suggestions, like things that people, if they don't have a platform yet, things that they might want to think about, that they want to make sure that they're considering?
Yeah, again, that goes back to content and what you're looking to achieve with your audience. If you're simply streaming to a Vimeo or a YouTube platform, which we've done plenty of times since March, it's really just putting out the presentation for them to receive it. It doesn't allow, certain parts of Vimeo and YouTube allow it, but for the most part, it's really you pushing out the product to them.
Hmm.
The other platforms allow you to gather information, analytics, and something to look back at and become better at that virtual offering for the next go around, for the next virtual event you might be putting on. So
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it's what you're looking to achieve with the audience. So it's really about knowing your audience and what they're looking to obtain from their experience in attending the event.
So getting back to, and we've had discussions about this before, like really looking at your why and how to create the experience, looking at the end result that you're looking to achieve, and you think that pretty much now, if you know those things, you'll be able to find the system that will work to give you that.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And if need be, with clients through industry experts and all the associations we're involved in, there's checklists that we hand out to clients. We have kind of things to be thinking about document. We put that in our bi-monthly newsletter and have that on hand. Our account managers do, to share with clients so that they get thinking about those particular topics. So when we get to that conversation of platform, they have a good understanding of what they're looking to determine or to offer up to their clients, and we're able to assist that way. So yeah, and
Excellent.
I'm sure everyone on the call today has seen their own checklist from their different associations that they're involved in. So
Yeah.
it's a group effort. It's the client and us coming to help one another get the best results.
Exactly. Excellent. Thank you, Justin. Now let's move over to hybrid for a moment. I mean, where do you see the hybrid meetings going? Like, what do you think it's going to look like?
So the industry experts that I've been talking to, one in particular, a gentleman by the name of Tom Stimpson, who is an AV consultant, and since March, he's really pushed the same message. The meetings aren't going to be the same until 2021. So, we're anticipating more live events in our region in the summertime of 2021. We're hoping by June, we're back to doing what we love. Although we love the virtual world and supporting our clients, we love the face-to-face events. It's hard to compete with that. Although virtual is doing quite a good job, and there's pros to that as well. I foresee our studio in particular and hybrid meetings being a part of the meeting world for years to come. This is something that, with less travel, stress, flights, hotels, changes, things of that nature, state restrictions on travel that could be in play for the next year or two, this is an option to offer up a compelling way to get your content out there or your message for all forms of meetings, for sure. So I see this being the norm for years to come.
Now, you with your studio, for like, I'm familiar with it now, but I'm not sure that everyone else. Can you maybe give a story of a client that you have, so that how you've utilized the different capacities?
Yeah, yeah. Let me think about the best one to bring up there. So, you know, we've had quite a few different opportunities and projects that we've brought in here. The Rochester Fringe Festival is one that comes to mind. So it's a local festival that is an international festival, brings people in. It's a big tourist attraction for the Rochester market, brings in millions of dollars to this region. And they have different types of artists that perform live throughout all different types of venues in Rochester. And Erica Fee and her team were one of the first festivals in this area to get on board with virtual. So they met with us and we consulted, figured out the best way to do things. And the best way to do things for her, and what has become the common virtual solution, especially as the hybrid production studio is concerned, is that we pre-recorded all the sponsor presentations ahead of time. So the big banks and big sponsors that were putting money behind this had a polished presentation on why they're involved and what the benefit is to the community from their perspective. And then that was done a week ahead of time, totally scripted with teleprompters and full crew. And then a week afterwards, we had the pleasure of having Erica back in a set similar to this, where she met and we did our press conference. We played back what's called the big reveal. It was a 15-minute video is what we produced for her and her team. And then we did a live Q&A with all the local news, and we timed it out. We had 5 or 10 minutes per news outlet. They asked their questions, moved on to the next. So that portion was live, and she got extended life and reached the audience she wanted to locally to get her message out there that the registration was open and we were forging ahead and going virtual.
That's awesome. That's a good story. I'm sure you've got a bunch of them. I mean, who'd you have? The Vikings CEO was there last night?
Yeah,
What?
last night. I mean, you know, Zoom is a driving force in this world. Clients are depending on it. They have increased their security. It's become a very reliable source for virtual and meetings, just like we're doing here today. So the Jewish Federation of Rochester was in studio. I just have to take a moment to thank the crew. We turned around some videos day of, edited them, and similar situation where we had 2, if not 3 presentations that were pre-recorded. And then the local president came in and that was played back. And we did a live Zoom with the gentleman, the owner of the Vikings, live. And that was the keynote speaker for last night's meeting from the studio. So it was very exciting. So from that perspective, hybrid meetings, you know, the pros that stand out, although we talked about the travel, less stress, you're reaching a larger audience from an association or a meeting perspective. Corporate-wise, certain sales people or financial people might not make it to all the meetings. Everyone's readily available, more so today than they were before. And there's less people saying I can't commit because of this, that, or the other. You're getting a larger audience, but more so what I've seen locally, regionally, is that people are bringing in more keynote speakers and the content is more compelling on all different types of levels. So there's a lot of pros to the hybrid and virtual meetings today. So certainly focus on those two. And that's been a hot topic for us with our clients.
Excellent. Okay, now I'm going to ask a selfish question.
Please
So
do.
I have several big corporate virtual events coming up, and I don't know if you can see this. I'm sure you can, but I wear glasses because suddenly a couple of years ago I couldn't see anything. So how do I, in order to have the great lighting in my studio that I have here, how does it, like, what do I do? Is there a tip for how, because everything's reflected in my glasses? Do you have
Sure.
any suggestions?
It's all about the angle. It's all about the angle of the lights. Here in the studio, I've got lights all over the place. Although I don't have glasses on, so I understand your concern there. It's all about where you position those lights. I think that would be the best. We have a We have a system. I'm going to selfishly give a quick plug. That's an at-home plus system is what we're calling it for speakers like yourself. But as we talked about before, you've got a great setup. You look amazing. It's really well put together. But we have these key lights that come on stands, and if you position them in the right way to the left and right of you, I think you can come up with an angle where it's not reflecting on your glasses and it doesn't
So
come
you
through
think
on
it's
the
because
camera.
they're too much in front? So if I maybe move them to
Yep,
the side. Okay.
yep. Do
Yeah.
you have a ring light, LED
I
light?
do. It's not on me
Yeah.
right now because I'm in the bigger studio, but
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
It's
Thank
all
you.
about where
I
those lights
appreciate
are
that.
positioned. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know what I want to make sure is
Yeah.
that, like, I have a million questions and I can get down into the details from a speaker perspective, but we've got a lot of planners on here, a lot of people in the industry who have their own questions. So, I'm going to open it up. Um, you guys have the option if you have any of those detail related questions for Justin, if you have any big picture questions for Justin, any technology things, anything like that, you can either chat them in. Oh, we already have people here starting. Okay, so Sue, what is the tech? Okay, knowing your audience, what is their tech comfort? The complexity of the platform needs to match up or be taught to the skill level of the audience. That's a really good question, Sue. So, how do you find it, given that a hybrid event, so these are two separate, right? So I'm going to ask the first one. Okay, so how do you decipher what the tech comfort is, and you know, do you have any thoughts on this for her?
As far as the audience is concerned on something like a Zoom meeting or webinar like this today,
Yeah,
you
or
know,
any event.
it ranges. It really ranges. And you got your novice that don't have much experience on computers in general. And then you have the people that are in this world or in a technical role or in front of a computer. I think there's a large percentage of people in the US that are. It's really a matter of conversing with them and determining that comfort level. What we're doing with some of the audience members, more so the keynote speakers or guest speakers, if you will, is setting up different parameters or things to be thinking about and sharing that with meeting planners to then share with people ahead of time. So tips and tricks on, like Heather and I just talked about, how to set things up, where to position your computer. For the at-home plus systems, this is a little different, Sue, but it kind of relates. The at-home plus systems, we have a YouTube video. We send that out to people. We have remote access to those computers. If we have folks that aren't tech savvy and make a mistake and may change some settings, we're able to jump on, walk them through that, test it out ahead of time. But the biggest key advice there is test things out ahead of time. Even do a dry run with your audience if you feel that that would be something they'd be willing to get on board with. But it's really about helping them out and determining what that comfort level is. I know that's a hard thing to do, but giving advice ahead of time, sending out tips and tricks is the best advice I think I can give you there.
Yeah, I think that's really good, is to maybe, you know, ask them, find out. A little pre-survey during even registration might be helpful to find out their tech skills. And then, you know, Justin just gave a bunch of options for you, from just a list of suggestions to a YouTube video to, you know, the if it's a speaker or presenter, you're maybe going to want to get somebody like a Justin at Cheshire to get involved in helping. That's a great question, Sue. I'm going to go to Carolyn for a second. How do you enforce speaker tech rehearsals, especially with non-professionals who think presenting online is the same as in person? Oh, let me add them, Carolyn. So, what do you think, Justin? How do you enforce these speaker tech rehearsals?
I think it goes back to the team you're working with, the meeting planner. That would be something, the meeting planner or the third-party planning organization we're working with is something we would work together on. That could go along with the tips and tricks that go out ahead of time. Could be the surveying we go through in the beginning, weeks and months out to get their feedback, but then also we got to force our hand. This is a live event. Whether you think you have experience and this isn't a big deal, this is mandatory. We're representing a bigger cause, a bigger organization. We're trying to fine tune our messaging. So in order for you to be on board with this particular event, we need you to participate. Make it part of the parameters of the contract, even just like you did with contracts with hotels. Here's the ins and outs and things that I expect from you when I come into your facility. I think you do the same with your speakers that you bring on board.
Oh, that's a good one, Justin. I appreciate that. Sue has one here. Given that a hybrid event is essentially two different events hosted simultaneously, can you tell us about the cost involved in something like that?
That's a hard question to answer just based on there's so many ins and outs, you know. The studio, it all depends on if we're coming to you and creating a studio. Say your event is in a particular region and all your guest speakers could come together. That's what's been happening here in Rochester. We had a couple of people for the AVIT Summit that came to our studio, pre-recorded, and then did a live Q&A from the studio. So there was no travel restrictions on board and things that we had to kind of work through. So that worked in that capacity. But if we were coming to your region, it would just change based on what the equipment list was, what we were looking to determine, what size audience the actual live audience portion was going to be, if that's something you're going to take us up on. We know that we've seen live events come back to some degree with less attendees and more social distancing and all the parameters. So it really all depends on that size audience and that size room. That still dictates the amount and size of equipment, if you will, that will go into that. So, and I think that's been the number one challenge. How do I pay for, you know, in simpler terms, this full setup of full screens, projectors, sound system? Those are the things we have to work around to determine that price point and how to come, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to partner with the people that are willing to work with you. There's hard costs associated with it, but since March, if I'd be lying if I said, here's the price, good luck, deal with it. That's just not the type of relationships we're looking to create, especially during this new world that we live in. That's just not going to set us up for success, but more so our clients for success or repeat business at the end of the day. So there's a give to take, and I think a good partner would come to the table with that type of conversation. So to be honest,
I have a
yeah,
question.
yeah.
So is it fairly safe to say that essentially you're doubling your AV costs because really it's two events done differently?
Again, if you were, that would be the start conversation. If we had no past history and you didn't come recommended, like there's a start point. But me personally, if you're in the studio, here's the reality. Chris, can you just are we ready for a wide shot? I'm sorry, I'm throwing Chris under the bus here. So you got 30,000 plus in equipment here. You got a customizable LED wall, truss, lights for days, sound system. We have 3-4 monitors sitting in front of me. We got robotic cameras. We have other webcams that are 4K for these wide shots that we're doing. We've got a team behind us with all the audio visual equipment. So there's $35,000 worth of equipment and labor that goes along with that. We're not going to get that price point. We know, Sue, that you're not going to pay that. So there's a happy medium. And what we've come to the conclusion on here after many months of back and forth is an hourly rate with a 4-hour minimum. That's nothing even close to $35,000. So there's the give to take. We can offer you, if you can bring all of your presenters to us, there's your savings. We give you a state-of-the-art studio that we don't have to set up and strike. We don't have to bring in union depending on what city we're in. We don't have to hire any outside resources. It's all self-contained, it's set up. There's your savings. And what I said about the price difference. Hey, we're gonna go to Connecticut and we need to be in a ballroom for 300 people. That's where it's harder to work on that price. We have resources around the country with labor and things of that nature and gear. So we do our best to sharpen our pencil, but we can give on the studio more so than we can give on the price on that live event portion of the hybrid meeting, if you will. And then the virtual component, depending on platforms, kind of dictates itself, and that price sorts itself out throughout the process. That's going to happen regardless, right? Mm-hmm. So does that make sense, Sue?
Yeah, I think that was really helpful, Justin. And I think that helps me put it. And, you know, while we're talking about cost, Senga had a great question here, is that clients think that a virtual event is like, oh, it's like no big deal. It's a lot cheaper than a live event. But there are, you know, there are details, there are costs that are involved, just like you mentioned. So how do we educate, I guess, our clients and still, I think there's been, because people had to, everybody was giving everything away. Like, we're going to do all these free virtual events. And now we're realizing you can't sustain that. That's not viable to have a business that continues to give everything away, right? So, like, what's that conversation look like? How can we help facilitate the education of our clients?
Sure. I think the first thing that comes to mind, like in any conversation, whether it's live or virtual, plan it out. Like I said in the beginning, I sound like a broken record, but plan it out like a live event. But where the price break comes into play is when you can bring 6 events to the table over the next 3 to 6 months, and you can outline those, pick your dates. It not only helps your schedule on the front end and all the planning and back and forth and details that go into this, but it also gives the production company you're working with that ability to come up with a better price as far as that's concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just reading the question over again there that I see on there to make sure I'm covering that. Does that make sense, Sanga?
Yeah. Oh, unmute, dear.
Sorry, this is kind of a personal question also, Justin.
Yeah.
Being a planner, I'm not currently unemployed. I'm on temporary layoff due to COVID, so not working with any clients, any of this, but my friends that are. I hear so much about the virtualness, and one friend's in sales and trying to sell virtual events to clients and, you know, trying to educate them, as you said, on the cost. A personal question, being in the position that I'm in, do you recommend as an AV professional, well, what would you recommend? Because I want to take a course on learning virtual events. That's kind of a loaded comment. What does that mean? I don't
Yeah.
even know what it means, but there are some friends of mine and colleagues in the industry that have taken the virtual events meetings manager accreditation on the Event Leadership Institute and I'm from Canada, I'm in Toronto. So I think the Event Institute is North American wide, but it is an
Yep.
accredited course. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Yes, there's been, since March, there's been so many courses. Oh, take this free virtual, learn this. And the planners are like,
Yeah.
so it's like, oh, you know, as a professional, and us not being, because we would just hire you and work with you and work through that as we would with a live event. You know, is there a course that you would recommend, or I was going to take this course? It's $700 US. It's 1,000 Canadian. So I wondered if you, and you probably don't know the course, but is there any other courses you might recommend as a planner that's sort of the ABCs? Like, I'm not a techie person. I've learned a lot of tech. I know a lot about AV over the years with live events that I've done and worked with my suppliers in AV that I'm in touch with, but wanting
Sure.
to learn a bit more on how to work with virtual events. Is there something you might recommend?
Yeah, so I have a couple different answers to that. I don't have one in particular that stands out, but what I want to do, and Heather, feel free to share my information. I'd love to follow up with Sanga and anybody else who has questions. I have a client for the last 6 years out of the DC market that we do a ton of events with, and we've partnered up quite a bit on the platforms, the training, more so on their side for the training. So the first thing I'm going to do is reach out to Roberta and her team, and at VRS meetings and events, they're awesome. And I'm going to get her take on what she would recommend so I can follow up with a particular. But I know they're heavily involved in PCMA, and they've been quite happy. Her sister's on the board there and heavily involved in the education piece. So she's going to have a recommendation I know that I could share with you. And then ASAE is another one, obviously in the DC market, that is going to have some stuff. CVET Connect, which happened, I want to say last week, early in the week. They have their own virtual world and platform, but I am very confident that they have a virtual training option as well for certification or accreditation. Me personally, because I'm not so much on the meeting side, I have these conversations with planners, and again, that's why I'm going to rely on the experts to give you what you need. Where I've focused my time is from a CDC perspective, because our studio went from office space for our technical team to the tragedy of downsizing to then ramping back up again to the studio, and different spaces throughout our facility has become these virtual mission controls for remote presentations and whatnot. My main focus was to become CDC compliant. So I I joke with the guys that there's a new officer in town. I'm the COVID-19 compliance officer. So when we're doing studio productions, and there's a couple other folks on our team that are also certified, but it's for studio and film related because we've kind of pivoted and offered that up. It wouldn't be a bad thing. It was inexpensive, 2 hours. I see a 4-hour and 6-hour option out there now, but that's allowed me different conversations with the film industry to become this hybrid option for them. But across the board, when anybody's in our facility with all the mandates and checklists that you have to go through at the state level, on making people feel safe and comfortable, and most importantly, the facility being cleaned, we're following all those guidelines now. So that has been, it's been beneficial across the board for sure. So I could share that with you afterwards if that would be of value, but it's a 2-hour, it's more about when we get back to, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's in person or whatnot, but anything in person in particular is where this would come into play to make your guest speakers, because when live events come back, even though it's going to be half the capacity in the audience or whatever that social distance in your area is going to be, that's still going to have to be applied. And I think it would only be helpful and not harmful to have that on your side.
Great suggestions, Justin. And Senga, I put, and anyone, I put Justin's, I hope this is okay, you said Justin's email and a link to his LinkedIn profile in the chat area so that you can connect with him there. We have a question about virtual backgrounds. And so I know I use virtual backgrounds with my logo on it. So there are moments when there's some visual degradation, and I've found that it mostly has to do with lighting, but it becomes kind of unsynced with the visual. Like, what causes that, and how can it be mitigated?
Oh, it's a combination of the video quality, the internet speed on the end users side of things. There's a few driving factors. Again, because we strive for perfection here, especially in a time where we're relying on technology. That's where we're pushing the pre-production of keynotes. We pre-produce it ahead of time. It's scripted. It comes across very clean and to the point. They get their message off, and then we leave the Q&A portion to the live end of things and going live through Zoom or any other platform. But yeah, lighting has a little to do with it. But I would say my best guess, without really seeing what you're seeing on your end, would be the streaming has a lot to do with that. There's studies out there right now. Our coax fiber companies are being bombarded. I know personally I've struggled just to get fiber into the building, and that's our next endeavor here personally. So we're hoping in the next 4 weeks or so we'll have fiber with a coax backup. That's another suggestion technically. Offer up a backup stream when feasible, when financially possible, if you will. Meaning stream it twice, give them 2 options to offer up. And that's what we're going to do as soon as we get fiber in the building. And we've been doing that with other methods. There's temporary solutions out there, whether it be satellite or your 5G options from your local provider. They're there. So that's just another option. And then we've also, through some live conferences we've done, played back the video content separately through a different stream and push people over to that behind the scenes to be able to minimize the potential situations like you're talking about.
Thank you. And Senga, take a look at the chat area there. Sue also put in there about the DES, the Digital Event Strategist through PCMA, covers a lot of information, but it requires some continuing education. So check out NPI as well. But so if anyone else has questions for Justin or comments for each other, put them in the chat area there. Or if you have a question for Justin right now, if you want to unmute and ask it, you can. And while they're thinking about that, Justin, this has been phenomenal information. You know, such a great source, and very gracious in giving with the information. Is there any final thought that you really want people to make sure that they know when it comes to events, whether it's live in person, whether it's virtual, hybrid? Like, is there something that you want planners to know that you wish that you could tell them? Like that you wish every planner would know?
Yeah, I would. And that comment would be simple. Partner with the people and the production companies or the people in general that you trust. There's so many options out there, and I'll internalize it. And I'll just say that I can't do what I do without the team behind me. I can't even tell you. I get emotional thinking about it because I've been interviewed a few times with a press release we put out for being a leader in this region on what we're doing, and I know that I'm nothing without them. And I would think in your position, you're nothing without those key people that you rely on and trust. For me, it's the people that I've spent endless nights, Chris and we haven't gone to bed on certain sales meetings in Colorado or Quebec City or wherever we were, So those are the people I surround myself with, and I suggest you do the same thing. It's not everything has to be about a budget. I know that's a driving factor at the end of the day, but when you're forward with your provider and your partner, if you will, it's a partnership. It's not just hey, we're doing your meeting and here's the price. Partner with the people you trust and you can rely on and you have history with, That would be my best advice.
That's great advice across the board, no matter what we're talking about today, right? I love that. And this is a community that's all about community and partnerships and collaboration. So that's a great way to do it. Now, I think it looked like, Moselle, did you have your hand up? It was kind of going up and down there, or were you just waving it?
Hey, Moselle.
Oh, we can't hear you yet. You got to unmute. It looks like you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
I've known Moselle for years. She's been a big proponent. She's the one that got me into your market to begin with through some MPI stuff.
Oh, really? Oh, well, thanks, Moselle.
I really miss coming up there. I really do, coming to the event. I think the last one was in Norwalk.
Yeah. Can you speak? Oh, no.
There she is.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, I forgot. I'm setting up actually because I have a session to do at 1:30 for the Professional Meeting Planner Summit. So I'm here just trying to get ready. I actually have some advice for the planners when working with a production company, because I'm a big proponent of letting them do what they do best and staying out of the way. So for the planners, my suggestion is you don't have to know everything. You are a meeting planner. You've got 1,001 things to keep track of. AV is not your expertise. Let those experts do their job. I find it very easy and just explain to them, this is what my client expects. This is their outcome, their objective of the program, what they expect to happen, what their outcomes are, and I need you to get me there. How you get there, truthfully, for me, I always tell them, none of my business, as long as I can afford it. I can't be worried about we always know how many people, when we see how many people, it does, end up being a dollar amount on how many people. I just like to know, okay, what's that person's function? What do they know? And it's not just to justify them being there. It's also to say, okay, if I have this challenge, if my main lead is not there, I know that person should be able to take care of it. But as far as I was on a call one day with someone who wanted to pivot I don't like using the word pivot. They wanted to revert or convert their program they wanted to really take a live meeting, and they literally wanted to do a live meeting on a virtual platform. And I'm just sitting there going, that's not going to work. It's never going to work. They're called live for a reason. They're called virtual for a reason. You cannot create the exact same thing that's live. And we all say it because everyone loves what? That human connection. You can't create the same in-person human connection virtually. All you can do is come as close as you can. And that's where your production experts come into play, because they see a lot more than we do, because most of us are doing a certain type of meeting or in a certain industry. And most productions, they're doing, something like Justin said, in film, they're doing medical, they're doing finance, they're doing incentives, they're doing launches. So they see a lot more different ways of doing things, different types. So I'm the type that if I see something and I'm like, oh, you know what? That may not be compliant for my meeting, but I can take that little piece and use it. So they do the same thing. They can take something from a totally different type of meeting and know how to apply it to your program based on what your needs are. So my best advice is don't get in their way. They know what they're doing, and it is a partnership. So you really should be having lots of conversations and making sure you're both comfortable in moving forward, because it's the planner who then has to talk to the stakeholders. And don't be afraid to bring your production company in to talk to the stakeholders, because sometimes if they're internal stakeholders, they feel that they're in charge because they're paying. But it's up to the planner to make sure that what they're paying for is what they're getting. And sometimes they feel that they can tell the planner, this is what I want, either get it or you're out. You know, they try to make you feel like you don't have a job. But sometimes when you bring in that expert and they explain, like how many of us have tried to explain, you can't have your full presentation on one slide. In a virtual world, it is really horrible. And you know, I did a program where one of the first speakers was a healthcare professional, and he gave all the do's and don'ts of what healthcare professionals like and don't like when they go to meetings. You know, they're kind of like, we don't care where the meeting is, it's the content we want. And you know, people are like, oh, we want to go to this place because people will come. No, they really want the content. And how is your content provided? From your production company. So that's why it's key. I always say content is king. So I keep that in mind because that's what really should drive it. And your production company is who's going to make sure it gets done properly. I tell people it doesn't matter where you are, how well you feed them. If they've come and they can't see anything on the screen or they can't hear anything coming out of speaker, you have totally wasted your money. So that's my 2 cents for today.
Oh, Moselle, that's fantastic information. I will tell you, I know to buddy up to my AV folks because they're the ones who make me look and sound good, right? So
Yeah.
you'd be amazed how often they'll tell me, oh my gosh, they don't, like the person who is telling them what to do doesn't understand the process of how to do it. So it's really good advice. Just kind of go with somebody you trust, like Justin said, and then be able to step back and let them do their
Exactly.
job. Really, really good advice.
The key to an AV technician's heart is just endless amounts of coffee on site.
Oh yes, that's the other takeaway. Make
keep
sure your
them happy.
production team is well fed.
And
Well,
now
Moselle,
apparently caffeinated.
Yeah.
Moselle, on your point of partnership, I just want to add, the sooner, to your point, there's a lot of stakeholders involved in these decisions, and usually we're not a part of those conversations, but when we are fortunate to be a part of those conversations, typically it works out to where we can create the results that the stakeholders are demanding, but walk them through technically how we're going to get to that solution. So it's a win-win. We're a partner. We're there as an extension of your team. So the more we're involved, the better the end product's going to be.
Right.
Excellent.
Great
Thank
advice.
you. Did anyone have any other questions for Justin? These were great questions, everyone. I really appreciate it. And Justin, you've been phenomenal, like just right on point with your answers. And I love that you're open to having people reach out to you if they think of their question later on. So
Please do.
definitely check in with Justin on LinkedIn, connect with him there. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we'll send out, for those of you who came in a little bit late, or if you're watching this as a replay, we're going to send this out very soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much for
everybody.
having me. Nice to meet everybody. Stay safe.
Justin, good seeing
Bye.
you.
Good to see
Thank
you too.
you.
Nice meeting you, Justin. Thank you.
Likewise.